From Sydney, Australia, all the way to Portland, USA, two misfits hang out after class to riff on the B-sides of professional life. These are your professional misfits. Hello, friends. All the way from Sydney, Australia, I'm your host, Christopher Sellers.
And from Portland, Oregon, I'm Brody Ipox.
And we are your professional misfits. And it's season 1, it's episode 8. We're talking about social media. And this is Brody's wheelhouse. Social media, what is it? What's its value? What is it good for? Where did it come from? Where are we going? All of these sorts of things. Like it's not a small beast to take on. And what we realized in the chat from yesterday, as a matter of fact, if you were there for like episode 7.5, was that it's also a fairly new beast that's constantly evolving. So, Brody, let's just dive straight into it. Social media, can we just push it all into a furnace and set it on fire? Like, what is it good for? What value does it bring? It seems to bring more problems. Is this true? Is this false? What's your hot take? First of all, do you think it's a net good or a net negative?
Funny, because I was going to stop you before you even started questioning me and ask you what is your net negative there? What is, what encompasses that for you, so I can kind of identify the pain points that you're working from, because there's plenty of them, right? There's too many. So
that's fair. So in setting up this discussion, it's kind of, Brody made the point the other day, it's kind of going to be a great discussion because I am not a super fan of social media. And of course, this is Brody's business and expertise. So I'm coming from a place of like, why the fuck do we need it? And it's just noise and trash. Whereas Brody, if he wants to, send his kids to school, kind of has to make the case that we should keep it. But okay, so let's start with the platforms that I use, perhaps as an example. Like
Perfect.
I have a Facebook account. I never use it. I might visit it once a week, and this is to maybe keep tabs on friends in Europe and whatever else, but I don't engage with anyone or anything that's on there, number one. My main platform is probably LinkedIn, which is most of my marketing and promotional stuff for professional means. Like I said to you in the last episode, if I could set it on fire or have someone else manage it effectively, then I would do that, and I would never touch LinkedIn again. I don't have Snapchat. I downloaded TikTok on your recommendation, Brody, so we'll probably get to that at some point. I don't have Instagram. I used to have it, and then I deleted it for all of these reasons. Like I was more interested in what was going on in the rest of the world and would watch other people's feeds and stories and stuff than I cared about any one of my friends posting about what they had for breakfast. Mm-hmm. So look, fair to say I'm probably not a savvy user. I don't understand how all the algorithms and backends work, except for stealing all of my information. So I guess I'm in the camp of what's the point, right?
Okay.
Now, precisely to our sort of challenge for this week, like when I'm talking about, I'm frustrated on LinkedIn because the algorithm changes, 2 or 3 months. Everyone's reach is down. Everyone's audience engagement is down. If I'm looking to attract clients in a very specific and particular niche, then social media marketing and learning to use this beast is something I probably have to get my head around. So there you go. That's my landscape. It may be similar to folks out there. It may, you might just use it as a hobby and a tool or a way to express yourself. I don't know, but I have the belief, might be a false one, that 90% of socials is just fucking trash and noise and a complete waste of time, energy, and space. Rant over.
Okay, perfect. But this is where I think I'm going to throw people off because you're right. Okay, you're right. Now, look, the thing,
Controversy.
right, and here I am trying to plead the case, right?
Right.
But that's the thing. This thing is constantly evolving, and we're hitting a high saturation point with social media. Everybody's using it. Everybody's figuring it out. Everybody's deciding what that subjectively looks like for them.
Mm-hmm.
So it's kind of still in its early stages, right? And people are still spouting the shit, still throwing up the smoke and mirrors, trying to figure out, is this perception the one that's going to work, or ultimately
What's
is
your
it going to be
personal
me?
brand, Brody? What's your personal
Right, right.
branding?
So 90% of it is noise. 90% of it is gimmicks. 90% of it is a bunch of people out there just throwing shit at the wall and hoping it sticks. And that translates, right? But for me, the 10% that's there, the amount of momentum that is possible, the amount of creativity that stems from it, the amount of opportunity that has arisen is, sounds strange, but the 10% for me is greater than the 90. I can look at that 10 and know that, hey, this is going to continue to evolve. People are going to see the exact patterns and, recognize the type of style that, you and I are talking about. Because really, that's what it is. It's a
Mm-hmm.
narrative that someone's creating. And 9 times out of 10, it's a highlight reel or it's a how to,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
bit. And, that's not, we don't care. Like we don't care. That's not what I'm interested in. It's like you said, I want to connect with different parts of the world. I want to learn, I want to grow, I want to share my perspectives with people that it's new and it's fresh to. What's the point of 50,000 marketers, right, on one platform talking to 50,000 other marketers about marketing? You
But
know
that's
what I mean?
LinkedIn.
It's,
That's LinkedIn,
oh,
bro.
it is 100%. And it's, and right now there's a lot of ego massaging that's going on. But
if
again, I
there's if
think,
there's 80 million users, then 70 million of them are marketing. And
oh
splice
yeah,
that, and slice that as like SEO, copywriting, marketing, branding, or any variation thereof. It
yep,
seems, but yeah.
yep, yeah, yeah, no. And, so for me, again, in that 10% is really where I think people's perspective needs to shift. Go
Right.
ahead.
So that's what I want to tap into, that 10%, and something that you said
Hmm.
earlier. So can you give
Hmm.
someone like me, can you give me an example of like a great campaign or a great use of social media where, either someone's gone from 0 to 1,000 overnight, or there was a dynamic shift, or your version thereof, to kind of help me get a grasp on what that might look like.
Yeah, I'll use one, and I'll use TikTok. And this is interesting because I think a lot of people argue that TikTok is the busiest. It has the most noise, right?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
And in so the least amount of opportunity. It's I think people are starting to build the perception you get selected or this happens and you're chosen. It's not like that. One for instance, a fantastic campaign that relayed human connection and almost social selling is, and you may have heard of him, Jake. He does the song Golden Hour. Very, very big right now in the States. And all he did was take a video of him playing his song, and, in the same similar vein as, reaction videos, he had people react live to his playing, and it went insane. And again, this was just him saying, in my eyes, outside in looking, going, what else can I do? You know what I mean? Like, I know I'm sitting on something. I know it's great. I've posted it 15 times. It hasn't hit. Nobody wants it. I'm gonna go record some reactions. So number one, there's the adversity that triggers creativity.
mm-hmm,
Okay, that's a huge thing that social media does. And then number two, within that adversity, you opportunity is born, because those videos did fantastic. They did amazing for a plethora of reasons.
mm-hmm.
They're relatable, they're interesting, they're engaging, they're sometimes they're surprising. You don't know how someone's going to react to the same experience you're having. And that's the social trick. There is, you are having an experience while gauging an experience. And it's very it's very inviting, right? It's like you're
Mm,
part of it. You know,
hmm hmm
I get to understand what is happening here on a different level. And that's just music. And I'm going to tell you this, the song's amazing. I like it personally. I think the kid's extremely talented, but if social media weren't around and he was busking on corners, I don't think he'd be where he was.
Right. So you made this point, excuse me, you made this point yesterday, and I think it's an excellent principle to tap into. So social media, by whatever medium, is the ultimate level playing field. It's sort of now the modern day digital public square where
Yep.
you can take your craft, your performance, your song, your art, your work, your professional concepts and ideas, and you can take them to the public square. I might get into a little bit more detail around why that's a false assumption. But for right now, the tools exist. TikTok, like to your point, I think you mentioned yesterday it was SoundCloud. Starting there,
Hmm.
like for all the
Hmm.
SoundCloud, sure, it might be oversaturated and seem like a bit of a joke now, but as it was coming through, like that was the first. And so, in terms of channels for musicians or artists to get their work out there on their own terms, the way they want it at zero to minimal cost. You know, so all of these tools have become massive game changers, right?
Hmm.
Now with that, of course, comes people who think they're talented, who think they're smart, who think
Hmm.
and that's
Yep.
probably the same in every industry. And so it's tough. It's again, the more people you draw into the marketplace, the more opportunity it seems there is, but also the more competition you have, and that becomes that community thing. But I want to pull out something that you did mention in that last example, because the fact that this guy might have released a track once and then released the same track two or three different times and it still hasn't hit.
Hmm.
Now for most, and me included, that's fucking heartbreaking,
Mm.
because if you craft content, or you feel like you've got something with a meaning and a purpose, and you release it for the first time, and if it's not, fair enough, like once or twice, not immediately well received, but after 4, 5, 6, 7 attempts, to keep reposting the same thing really feels like just smashing your face against the wall. And like, are we supposed to expect a different result?
Mm. So interesting. Yeah, I mean, and look, there's two ways to identify yourself in that. You know, am I actually sitting on gold, right? And am I missing something within this platform? I think a lot of times it's platform specific when it's kind of like that example. I think for TikTok, a lot of people don't understand the churn rate of content, you know, and it doesn't matter how good your shit is. If
Mm,
you actually very closely pay attention, and I mean closely pay attention to big accounts, you know, that are highly active, you will catch regurgitated content in the teens, you know, and again, 9 times out of 10, it's about 3% of those, you know, 15 posts that actually do good,
mm-hmm,
right? So, and like you said, it raises that question. So, is the content shit, you know, like, or you know, am I doing something wrong? Most of the time, again, it's a platform specific thing. And that's where it's hard, right? We're all general users. We're all, you know, on it, what I look at as like kind of a civilian level when you're talking about
mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
that kind of social media exploration. So you don't have all the tools, you don't have all the information, you don't have all the resources. One fix to that is you're on a social media platform. look, you know what I mean?
mm-hmm.
Look. And if you can't yourself identify what's working, take about 10, 15 minutes, watch 5 videos, and you're going to start to develop an understanding within all of that information that to you will fit to the way that you're trying to produce the content. And it seems like that cliche that it's like, this is on you and this is, you know, how you're going to do it, but that's kind of the unique thing about social media right now. And I think where too people are winning, you know, if you can take that slam a couple times, if you if you have the ability to sustain, that belief in yourself through the bad metrics or the
Mm-hmm.
hollow moments or, the void of engagement that should be there, you're going to win though. It's the numbers game.
So, all right, let's chime in on that. What is winning on social media? So I'll ask you specifically, like, what if I'm a user, or if I'm a new business, or if I'm an individual, what how can social media in any form help me, either as a business or to actually bring in revenue? Because there's a lot
Hmm.
of,
Hmm.
there's a lot of highlight reels, there's a lot of like, I'm living the lifestyle, but
Yep.
that might be sexy, but how does that like either attract clients or attract buyers, or how does that actually translate to a bottom line?
Yeah, yeah. So one of the things that I like to say is really one thing that a lot of social media marketers, a lot of managers, a lot of marketers in general, I think get wrong is we've got these boxes and these processes, right? That we have statistics and evidence that they've worked, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we place everybody in them, and that's not social media. that that is the opposite grain of the way that social media is working. And social media is saying there's so many damn boxes that you can't put yourself into one, because enough people will find you from all other boxes that they'll find something that they relate, whether it's the way your hair falls or the tone that you have when you're upset and
Mm-hmm.
they can see it in a video. Those things are, those again are options that we didn't have before, and to not center yourself, number one, around your objectives. So why are you on social media? Are you there to retain customers? Are you there to build an audience? Is it a community that you're looking to build? Because those are two different things.
Yeah.
And I think as soon as you can identify the why, it's really going to help you identify the how, because there's certain things that won't work within those parameters if you know your goals and objectives. There's certain things that will read differently if you know what direction you're trying to move. So for the general user, for somebody new to this, for somebody trying to actually retain value and say, is this giving me something? Number one, start something, put some content out there, and without the initiation, see if a single person outside of social media mentions that you're making social media content. They will. They
Mm-hmm.
will. And that alone is word of mouth and what they call dark socials.
Yeah.
The amount of attraction that I actually bring in conversation that I am facilitating that I'm not actively part of. That's
Mm-hmm.
the dark
Mm-hmm.
socials. And that happens all the time, right? So for instance, I tattoo myself on TikTok. I know how many people in my hometown that see that content are talking about it, because I've rolled up to a McDonald's, and not like in a celebrity sense. It's somebody that I knew, or,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
their kid, or, whatever it is. But they go, "Oh, dude, I saw your video on Facebook. That's so cool. Can I see the tattoos?" Or whatever it is.
Mm-hmm.
They didn't interact on the video. I didn't know that they had an interest. I didn't know that even mattered to them.
But
And
isn't that
here it
annoying
is.
as fuck? Like for me, it is like to hear, because I swear, like, if there's 7 days in a week, I can go 5 or 6 without reaching outside my immediate circle, and sometimes it's almost like you don't exist. That's the most frustrating thing on a lot of socials, especially if you're trying to get traction. You can
Yep.
feel like you're just shouting into the void.
Hmm.
And I've said before, there's, rejection or praise, there's only one thing worse, and that's silence. So, but then to hear from either like a random friend or someone like vaguely associated with something, and they go, "Oh, dude, I saw that article. Like, oh, I heard you released a book." I'm like, "The fuck!" Like, don't hear from you, don't get a message, don't anything, but you're
Yeah.
citing a post, from 3 or 4 months ago. I'm like, okay, yeah, whatever.
Yeah, dark socials. People like to live in the shadows of this thing, and that's kind of it. There's an advantage to that though, and
Is
if
there?
there's a I do. I firmly believe that, because look, the thing is, yes, we need engagement, right, to reach those metrics that everybody wants, and fulfill those deep dark
To
social
tickle the
media
ego. Yeah, yeah,
desires.
yeah.
Yes, 100%. But yeah, and look, it goes as far as, check this out. So when I first started this thing, I was flipping Instagram profiles. That's what I would do. I'd go find a company, knew they weren't on Instagram. I'd build them an Instagram profile and say, "Hey, I have a spot for you. Let's talk business." Flip the profile, hand it off, I'd move on. And what I started to realize is, as I was doing this, I would talk about it a little bit, and try to reach business in circles and things like that. Nobody gave a shit. They didn't understand it. This was still at the birth of this thing. I
Mm-hmm,
was
mm-hmm.
a little bit ahead of the curve, in the sense that I knew that there was money in this before there was money in this. And it raised some conversations that I don't think would have happened if I didn't have social media as a megaphone. And
Right.
that's, again, people just saw what I was doing. And that's, man, you can window shop for anything now.
Mm,
You can, and again, as much as it's frustrating to be the lone shop on the corner that's got a fucking tumbleweed scrolling past it, it's, you're still on the corner, though. You're still
mm.
there. Like, and there's some power to that. And again, it takes a little bit of grit. I don't think
Yeah,
social media is for everybody. I really don't.
yeah. That's a
I
good point.
think, I think one of the things that I like to talk about the most, and sometimes this feels like, for my own personal stuff, this feels like I'm shouting to the void. I have a mental health channel, and kind of talk about exactly this, the expectations and kind of the loneliness that's there when they're not met.
Mm.
That's not real, though. You know what I mean? And as much as I'm not taking away from the experience, because I've felt it myself, it's up here. That's something you're doing to yourself. And go ahead.
Yeah, so there's something before we sort of segue down this laneway, because
Okay.
I know we're going to
Hmm.
get
Hmm.
there. There's, I guess, from the chat that we've just had, if you had to pull like the top two or three things that effective social media can do for you, you know,
Hmm.
what would they
Hmm.
be? If I'm a small business, or if I'm a professional consultant. So if I wanted to if I wanted to leverage social media intelligently and with a strategy and with a purpose, what can it do that other forms or platforms can't do, or that you would recommend it for me for instance?
So again, I think a good marketer, a good social media manager would tell you that's subjective.
Of course.
And this is a thing that I think a lot of them are afraid to say, because you're going to turn down business. You might not have it for social media, right? You you
Oh,
you might not, and
I
that's
think that's the first time I've ever heard anybody say that, ever.
I people are afraid to. People are afraid to, because then look, in most people's eyes, it takes away the power of social media if I don't have the option.
Mm-hmm.
If it's not it there for me, what's, like you said, what's the point? But that doesn't mean that you can't develop something to bring, right? I
Correct.
think, again, the tools and adversities that we all face are right in front of you, and for all intensive purposes, the parameters are pretty similar for each of us. If you can find a way within that to bridge the gap of not having it,
Mm-hmm.
you still place yourself in the race.
So, for an example, Matt Malloy is a B2B video production ex BBC guy in London. So he does a lot of B2B stuff with video projects. Lovely guy.
Mm-hmm.
He bought a copy of the book. He invited me onto his podcast. He was talking about my content and how I, self-produce a lot of videos and do all this sort of stuff. And he's like, What's your advice for people who aren't comfortable on video?" And yeah, look, to be fair, social media is vague, but video is specific. And there's some people who will straight up go, "I'm not great on video," or objectively aren't, to your point.
Mm-hmm.
And so he asked me, what would you do to people who aren't comfortable on video? And I said, do something else. Now,
Yep.
there's something I designed. Like, we all know what an audiobook is, right? It's
Mhm.
a voice recording of a written, book. I developed something for fun called an audio pamphlet, which was basically a little scripted memo or message or advertisement, whatever it happened to be. It's a stock photo of me, and then I'll animate the actual text and dialogue. You've probably seen a couple of them,
Mhm.
and I'm like,
Mhm.
and this is all it takes. It takes a 30-second to like 1 minute voiceover of whatever it is you're reading, a stock photo of you, maybe a little bit of sexy graphic design, and then put in some sexy text. Now,
Mhm.
you don't have to be on video, but in terms of a marketing or advertising or social media content, they get they get you, they get your style, they get a flavor and sense of who you are, they get to hear your voice, which is
Mhm.
actually a really, really powerful tool, for those who like aren't comfortable with their face on camera, or don't know what to do with their hands, or don't aren't into podcasts, for instance.
Well, yeah, exactly. I mean, circling back to the it factor, right? I mean, again, that's such a subjective thing in and of itself,
Mm,
right? So, and to me, the it factor is the creativity around the fact that you might not have it, right?
mm.
Like it is identifying that, hey,
So how do I make it work for me?
for me, exactly. And I think, look, I think a lot of people get lost because number one, there's all of this noise and influence that it's like, hey, it should be this way.
Yep.
That's wrong. It shouldn't be that way. It might work in some similarities for you, but again, if you
Hang
can
on. You
identify,
mean I
go ahead.
can't download like the 10-step,
No,
easy to follow,
nope.
subscribe to the newsletter,
Why do you
guarantee
think everybody doesn't have 400,000 followers right now?
guaranteed growth if I just show up and post every day,
Yeah.
build my personal brand.
Yep.
Brody,
Yeah.
you're destroying the illusion. I can't cope.
Well, look, and that's the thing. I love social media. I
You
do.
do.
I think it's amazing. I think it's powerful. I think humans are beautiful. I think there's so much positivity there. I think there's a lot of momentum. I think there's a lot of hope that's been built in this space as well. I think there's a lot of people that have been saved, but I am not one to deny the people that have been hurt. I am not one to deny the people that have been left in the dark. I'm not. There's two sides of every battle, right? And
And
to be
yes, go on, please. Yeah.
and to be just one of those people that like I said, like you said, it's the 10 steps, or I can sell you this ebook and you're going to have instant success. I never ever ever want someone to fall under that facade. It's work. It's hard. It takes creativity. It takes self-awareness. It takes adjustment. It takes so many different things and components that really the cool thing to me about social media is if you take this thing serious, it's a fucking mirror, baby.
Hmm.
It's there to show you where you're lacking in creativity, where the human connection is not for your message, the things that you should and shouldn't do for your own purpose and service, whether that's a product or a service in and of itself. It doesn't matter if you can't identify again how you are independently moving through this process. You're just another one of the people in the churn. It's the same exact thing that you don't want to be a part of. You want to be recognized for you, right? Well, you got to be a little different. You know what I mean? You can't just show up. That's not going to work anymore. And that's something that I tell a lot of people. And again, it is controversial because now it's been long enough that we've been in the narrative that social media is powerful and there's so much opportunity. And now, again, we've had enough people say, if you just show up, it's going to work.
Mm.
No, no, there's too many people showing up. There's too many people showing up.
So let's go back to that. The You mentioned it about social media being a mirror, and I am definitely inclined to agree. But that also means what gets reflected back at us a lot of the time is ugly and
Mm-hmm.
uncomfortable. So let's
Mm-hmm.
let's step out of business for a moment, but like let's examine like the darker side of socials and the personal side of socials, right?
Okay.
I mean, we are aware now that cyberbullying is ingrained in
Mm-hmm.
culture since the birth of Facebook, and people realize like I can find you directly and message you anytime that I want from and anonymity. That's another thing. Like socials provide anonymity.
Mm-hmm.
So on the business side, where you might be pushing for some sort of authenticity or to build you and your brand and your name and your integrity, it also, the shadow side of this is it provides anonymity for people
Yep.
to say and do and behave inhumanely,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's a part that we can't ignore. And I guess I'm also interested to get at your perspective on this because you've got four young boys, like the oldest of which is a teen,
Mm-hmm.
right? So this is an influence, is it not?
Yeah, it is. And look, again, like I said before, I am not one to deny the gravity of social media just because I can identify the power, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Um,
yeah.
and inherently that has come mostly from watching my children and how they are growing up and interacting with this, esoteric beast that they have to,
Mm,
in their own world learn how to slay, and I'm not equipped to teach you because I'm
yeah.
still learning. I'm still learning. I'm still figuring out how to identify some of these things. And it's so much deeper, I think, in the generations, after us, because it is their night and day. You know what I mean? It is every waking moment. And even if none of my kids have their own Facebooks, none of them have YouTube, they have an email so they can sign up for video game stuff,
Yep.
but even that's monitored.
Mm-hmm.
That still, I am now placing my children in a position that the entire world can influence them, not just me,
Mm,
not just me anymore, not just
mm,
my words. And for instance, this is a little bit on the personal side. I actually had my one of my middle sons come to me and ask me what hell was because he had come across a video on YouTube. And look, the thing is, I'm one to speak, right? And I talk about things that, have a heavier connotation to them. But I'm also not one to try to sway influence. And this video that he found was dark and it was heavy and it was something that someone his age shouldn't be exposed to.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
In that light, so to say that it's an influence, I think genuinely right now is an understatement just because of we don't know how deep this influence goes. This might be something that fundamentally shapes, kids in the way that they view the world, because
And it
it's
already
not just us anymore.
Yeah, it already does. Like, there's a ton
Yeah.
of, to your point, it's in its infancy, and there's already a ton of research that is sort of sounding those alarms of like you need
Mm-hmm.
to monitor and limit and be
Mm-hmm.
really fucking careful of how
Mm-hmm.
much exposure
Yep.
developing minds have to this in any sort of capacity, let alone the mental health implications of keeping up with the Joneses or being happy or what success is and a bunch of other themes we've talked
And,
about during the
and look, I
course.
think a lot of people think kids don't experience that. They think that
Right.
kids watch YouTube videos and they don't go, "Oh, I wish I had that." So for instance, when my oldest was watching YouTube videos, and YouTube Kids, again, monitored. This is not something where he's watching degenerate content and his brain is melting in his skull. He's watching kids play with toys and he's
Yeah.
watching parents interact with kids, and he goes and asks, "Why don't we have people send us toys?"
Right. Right.
That's a good question.
Yeah.
That's a good question. And again, it's keeping up with the Joneses. I see this family and they do these things and it's so cool and I love it and I'm attached to it. Why doesn't my family do that? And there's a detriment to that. There's something painful, that I think kids are exposed to too early. And I think it's the thing that hurts me is I think it's aging kids faster than we've ever seen. For instance, my 11-year-old, he's 16.
Hmm.
For all intents and purposes, he's 16. And That's sad. That's hard, you know.
For some reason it reminded me that there's a splinter niche of, parents creating content with their kids.
Mm-hmm,
And
mm-hmm.
now that to me is just bizarre and slightly perverse, and I wonder what it does to the kid. But that's a whole other category over there. But there's something I do want to talk about that doesn't get raised, and I want to raise it for a particular reason. But because we're talking about the creator economy and access to social media, the one thing that no one never talks about is porn or the sex industry, ever.
Mm-hmm,
It never
mm-hmm,
comes up
mm-hmm.
on it never comes up on LinkedIn, and it's taboo sort of everywhere else.
Right.
But everyone knows what OnlyFans is,
Mm-hmm,
right?
mm-hmm.
And everyone knows what Pornhub is and is probably aware of the Pornhub scandal as well. But if we're talking about objectively, if we're talking about a creator economy, right? And this is why I think it's interesting, and I never get the chance to flag it on LinkedIn or make this point. A, because I know it will make me a pariah if the post even stands up. But if you want to learn from any industry in terms of branding, content, marketing, niche, knowing your audience, knowing how to monetize content, all of the business nuts and bolts. If you wanted to objectively understand that at a scale that eclipses anyone,
People don't even have any idea.
right, anyone or any other platform, is that you should be examining, and I mean that in to read the articles, the sex industry and content creation. Because I
you
don't.
you
Am I
you
wrong?
had to specify that it should be
No,
the
come on, man. Like
articles.
let's be honest. Like, am I wrong? And I don't think people understand even historically how influential sex industry and porn production has even been to media. Like, fun fact, VHS or Betamax? VHS. Do you know why? Porn decided, right? Porn decided. DVD or Blu-ray or anything. DVD. You know who decided? Porn decided. Streaming services. Who was the first one on that? Individual content creation. Who was the first one to get? Like, you have no idea the quality of camera, the type of camera, sound equipment, lighting, all these sorts of things. The democratization of content creation has also swept along with it, obviously, the creation and proliferation of sex content. And now there's two issues, and I'm being very, very clear about them both. Objectively, this is to one side, like in terms of how it's done and why it's done, in the particulars. The actual marketing and business side of it, there's a lot to be learned that no one ever talks about for their own reasons.
Mm-hmm.
But precisely to your point, the democratization of these tools has also, the proliferation of these tools makes it more accessible. So not is it more acceptable to users, it's more accessible to creators. Now this also opens up this Pandora's box of morality and ethics, because just certain content, certain careers, certain choices can have a lasting impact when it comes to social media. Because once it's online, it's there forever.
Oh, 100%. And anyone under the conception that you can go and delete, you're wrong. I mean,
Mm.
number one, that information is stored somewhere. And even if you were to delete it before someone found it, it's the markers are still there, right? People understand and can identify someone that had followed a particular path, whether that be OnlyFans or, adult industry,
Mm.
whatever, right? And look, that's kind of one of my biggest things with social media. The power of it has also given rise to, some pretty degrading things in my eyes, right?
Mm.
And again, a large portion of it is because I have sons,
Mm.
and look, boys are at the mercy of the world around them, in terms of that that controlling drive. You know, we are men, we are biological, there's something there. And if this is the type of media that is this readily accessible, and
Right.
like you said, what I think too a lot of people don't understand is, look at the amount of money generated from this industry, right?
Right.
And right, and
And
then
that's the other thing that everyone wants to ignore. It's like, oh no, it's this giant looming elephant in the room, but everyone's like, oh yeah, personal branding. It's like you
billions. We're talking
Right.
billions. You know, and that's not me being exaggerative. That's
Yep.
billions with a B.
Yep.
Like that's and look, 90% of it's free. That should
Mm.
say something to you, right? That, and again, I don't think they give a shit what influence it has, and I think a lot of people that are in that industry, even in some degree that wouldn't want to immorally influence, don't understand, because it's like you said earlier in the conversation, we've given permission and almost rise to these behaviors in the sense of acceptability, right? It's there. It's
Mm.
there. I might as well accept it. You know, that's bullshit, you know. And but then look, that's where this gets tricky. Okay, because I'm also one that says the thing about social media that, and look, that's just coming to fruition as well on the front of free speech. There's
Yeah.
this is a big thing. Censorship is a dangerous game to play, right? And in my eyes, there are certain things that fall under a category that need direct censorship, and this, and not from a moral standpoint. I'm talking about what porn does to you biologically. Look
Mm.
at a scan of your brain when you're watching porn and when you're fucking hitting a line of cocaine. Watch how
Oh.
similar. Watch how similar those areas and those cortexes in your brain light up. You think that's a good thing?
Mm.
No, it's not. It leaves a huge chemical detriment after the fact, right? And it's a false chemical high that you
Mm.
are creating because, again, it's behind a screen. It's not real. This is
Mm.
not
Mm.
something you're
Yeah,
tangibly feeling.
it's detached, it's desensitized, and
It is.
it's a whole, again, it's a whole other beast, which I'm sure we will get into. In the way that
This should be our episode that we haven't figured out in relationships.
it
How
should for
does
season two. For season two, maybe. Yeah,
yes.
maybe we should, because both boys and girls, and when you factor in when you factor in the appeal of social media, because it seems to be synonymous with easy money, right? So
Mhm,
influencer
mhm.
equals easy money and lifestyle.
Yep.
Content, content creator, easy money and lifestyle.
Right.
Um, Content creator on OnlyFans or anyone else, easy money and lifestyle. And that's absolutely not the case. And I know a few sex workers as well as personal friends, and it's a profession and an industry like anything else. You need to have professional standards, and it's a job, and 90% of it is vetting fucking idiots,
Hmm,
and
hmm.
keeping yourself safe. And that's like any, if you handle anything professionally, it will become a profession. Um, and I think, to your point earlier about censorship, I think, and free speech and this tug of war, it's also interesting when we fold in AI from what we talked about earlier in the season, because now you're going to have anonymous people or organizations mass producing content for whatever purpose, for whatever reason, and somewhere in there, we have to legally and personally, as an individual, filter what is appropriate or worthwhile, what is legal, what isn't, what
Hmm.
is free speech, what should be restricted. Like, are neo Nazis allowed to have their own site because free speech is a thing? But that if there was a really interesting, Netflix had a documentary on Pornhub, and I can't remember what it was called. I think it might be like In the Industry or something. Anyway, if you look up Netflix documentary Pornhub,
Hmm.
go watch it. Now, it was really interesting for a couple of reasons, because it gets into the background of what Pornhub is, and they're like, look, we're a content platform like anything else, and it's actually really boring. And I think they come out of Sweden, no, Canada, the Canadian,
Okay. Okay.
which is fascinating in itself. Um, but there's a good documentary in the fact that it gives you an objective slice of, there were people over here who were content creators, and they were straight up about it should be vetted, and content creators, should have a registration process and should be verified and should be all, there should be checks and
Mm.
guidelines in place. So the content creators themselves were dictating, in order for the industry to be safe, in order for us to be safe, in order for this to be healthy and profitable and equitable, there should be guidelines and conditions and verification. And basically, Pornhub didn't give a fuck, because Pornhub's job was to acquire content, as much as content, to sell it to users, to get advertising space for all of these sorts of reasons. Now,
Mm-hmm.
this goes on unchecked for years. And of course, on any platform, especially platforms like these, you'd have users uploading illegal, material, um, underage participants, all of this sort of stuff. And so, as Pornhub grew to be the behemoth that it is, of course, this attracts the kind of attention from right wing religious groups who are like, well, there's, and this is where the disconnect lies. They go, well, there's underage girls on Pornhub. Pornhub's bad. All sex work is bad. And so then they start this crusade on Pornhub, but then all sex work, and then
Mm-hmm.
going after the payment gateways of content creators, for instance, and putting pressure on OnlyFans, because I think OnlyFans briefly then, due to public pressure, decided, well, we're not going to take this type of payment. We're not going to take Visa or Amex or these sort of gateways, or Visa or whoever it was withdrew their support of OnlyFans, and
Mm.
all the content creators. It was funny because it went full circle, because 90%, over 90% of OnlyFans is adult content creation. And
Mm-hmm.
so you're going to cut off we're your only users, right? So it was an interesting documentary, in as much as getting into this argument of where the responsibilities lie, where the legalities lie, where the ethics of it lie, and there's no denying, let's not kid ourselves, there's consumers in a market for it. The
Yeah.
same men
Mm-hmm.
that sit, and vote for whatever, are the same men that are downloading, twin incest 18-year-old teens. Don't
Right.
fucking kid yourself. So
Right.
if it's a multi-billion-dollar global industry, there's a market. And to your point, when 90% of it is free, people are still willing to pay for it. So it's it's a and we're moving into AI, and we're moving into deep fakes, and we're moving into all these sorts of things. And I will go
Mm-hmm.
back to what I said in the original episode on content creation, is that we know generally deep down that porn addiction for men, or for anyone, is generally a deep seated yearning for connection. There's
Mm-hmm.
something
Mm-hmm.
missing. There's some form of intimacy. There's some sort of connection or need that I have that I can't find any other way. And this is quick, it's easy, it's cheap, it's free, it's available online, and no one can judge me. And all of social media, in my view, is looking to facilitate this type of human connection in some way, in some subtle, some subconscious way. Now, to your point of the 10%, Brody, it can be used for a net positive. And within that 10% is also, positive business practice, right?
Yes. Yes.
The other 90% is something we're going to have to negotiate, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, absolutely. And again, falling back to, using the kids as an example, not just for ourselves anymore, right? This is the world we're in. This is the world around us. And again, if you looked at the world, okay, and statistically broke down the good to the bad, I'm sure that you could probably on average come up with more bad than you could good. And I think that's the way that it is for most of us. Which are you going to focus on? Which matters more? At the end of the day, we have our odds and we have our statistics, but it really does truly matter where you choose to place your attention. And again, for me, it's been such a beautiful thing to be able to have these conversations. And I think more often than not, I have swayed people. And for instance, you are on TikTok, my friend, and that may not that may not have turned out exactly like we had planned, but that's to show the testament that, hey, even if I can't directly identify it, I know it's there. I know something is there. And yeah, that's a
So,
cool thing.
so to bring this full circle, and there's a nice to lighten the mood a little. I just remembered the name of the documentary. It's called The Money Shot. So look up The Money Shot on Netflix. It's a great title. But so to pull this full circle, and as much as I trash on LinkedIn, Brody and I met through a mutual friend on LinkedIn.
Mm-hmm.
And Brody constantly reminds me, he's like, dude, like, you're in Sydney, Australia, and I'm in Portland. Like, we're literally in two separate countries on the other side of the world. Like, in what other forum would we meet?
Yep.
I'm like, yeah, you're right. And so we met on LinkedIn. We started out with a mutual friend on a different sort of podcast, and it didn't quite work out. And then Brody reached out to me about a week or two later and said, hey, man, I've still got this idea. Are you down for it? And so now here we are. And we're building in public. We're promoting this on LinkedIn. Brody bribed me onto TikTok, so stay tuned and see how that goes. But and the tools. So we're using these tools that we talked about. We put out the episodes and the highlights on YouTube. We publish on Spreaker. Most of these are available to us at low cost or free. We built the website that we can drive people to. We've got season 2 slated, ready to come up. So we've got plans, and there's a lot that we can build. And the tools that we're using are cheap, free, and accessible, that anyone can use, and anyone can build a podcast in the same way.
Just so everybody's catching this was an episode where Brody, was supposed to convince you of social media, and here we are at the end of the episode. And if you pay close attention, that is Chris.
Yeah, look, no, I similarly, I think it's funny, isn't it? You've got a different standard for yourself as you do to everybody else. But that also, I think I recognize it as more of a tool, and LinkedIn and certain things I can look at and go, look, it's a tool I don't understand. And I get frustrated when you change the rules on me, and I get frustrated when this doesn't translate. And to your point, earlier in the week, I posted that video. For those who don't know, like, I'm a bit of a fan of card tricks, and so I'll demonstrate some creative principles.
Good.
Thanks, man. And so here's the thing, like, on paper it ticks all the boxes. Like, it's me, it's on brand, I'm talking to the camera, I'm demonstrating a point on creativity and abstract intelligence, and in the meantime, here's this sexy card trick, and I've made the card vanish and disappear across the room, right? And so I posted this 3-minute video on LinkedIn, and I think I said to Brody the day before, if this doesn't go viral, then I'm burning everything down. And I think it's got maybe 800 impressions, not even 1,000 in the space of whatever. And I know, kind of to your point, if you have something, and I know no one else can do this in the way that I do it, and whenever I post card tricks, everyone always focuses on the trick. They tend to forget sometimes what the principle that I'm demonstrating. They're like, holy shit, how did you do that? Which is, fine, I guess. But it's like,
that's the finding the you in this. You know what I mean? There's something, you're on that. You're on it. You have the scent, right? And then there's going to be that particular piece that clicks where it's like, okay, that video, I was a little bit shorter. I was a little bit more concise, or the way that I framed my statements went with a flip of the card, or whatever it may be. Those tiny little shifts in that gold that you already have provide that polish and give you that coin.
Fuck off.
but look, that's the work. It's gotta keep going. And I think one of the things that most people are so tired of is like, and especially if you've been touched by any sense of marketing, you hear A and B test all the time, right? And you just want to rip your fucking hair out. But if there's a practical sense, and again, where you can touch your own vein of creativity, that A and B testing is going to take you to the next level, and
so there is a reason ladies and gentlemen, why Brody is back of house and handling all the production stuff, and I am front of house handling all the other design and creative choices. It's like, bro, you steer this ship in whatever direction and you tell me what metrics and I will follow your lead. Just tell me where to, I'll paint by numbers. You just lay it out. So that's the relationship at present. And it seems to be working out all right. We seem to be off to a hot start, which is nice.
I mean, here we are on episode 8, and most people don't make it past 5. So, I mean, we're doing something right.
And we got season 2 lined up.
Yeah.
Any final notes for people at home, Brody, if they care about social media, care branding, they care about social media. Yeah.
So look, it's not what everybody told you it was. Okay. And if you really do want to approach this thing and you want to take a crack at it for yourself, it's going to be work. And you're going to have to look at you, not just the social media, not just the tactics and strategy. You're going to have to look at you. But if you can do that, there's a whole world waiting to find you. There's a whole world waiting to connect. And shit, all it takes is getting out there. So yeah, just to keep that light and brief, I think don't feed into the hype, but believe that there is a possibility.
That's nice. I like that. I like that a lot. So that wraps up episode 8, ladies and gentlemen, on the value of social media. Coming up next, we've got episode 9, and does school prepare you for life? And we get to talk to Paul. We get to talk to Paul, my ultra endurance pharmacist.
Yes.
And certified misfit. Cool guy. Really cool conversation. I'm looking forward to that. So does school prepare you for life, Brody? Do you get all the tools? Do you get all the knowledge? Do you get everything you need in order to succeed in the world?
I didn't go to school.
There you have it. Certifiable. But this is what we'll be discussing. This is what we're discussing, because school gets a bad name. It gets blamed for all the failings in the universe. A lot of people take it for granted. Teachers have an extraordinarily hard time, especially in times of COVID. Let's not forget that everyone's just run remote classes for 2 to 3 years, which is insane, both academically
complete
and socially.
shift. Yeah.
So this is what we'll be unpacking, and we'll be bringing Paul in as a guest because he's a really, really interesting dude, and he's just got back from Laplandia in Sweden, where he's done the Ultra Arctic Marathon, so about 10 days across 500 kilometers solo with him in a sled racing. And it's like, here's the start line, go. You're on your own in ice and wilderness. So it'll be he's a super cool guy. You can find him on LinkedIn as well. So if we can find you, Brody, if we can find you and we can find Care Branding, where can we find you?
First of all, go to Pro Misfits podcast, and any relevant links to, my socials or the podcast in general will be there. And Care Branding will be launching at the end of May, so stay tuned, and I will have more information then.
Nice. And if you're looking for me, you can also find me at promisfitspodcast.com. You can find me personally at cssellers.com. You can find me on LinkedIn as Christopher S.Sellers, or just find Brody and you'll find me.
You'll find us. Yeah.
You'll find us. We'll be misfits in the comments. Not talking about the sex industry and marketing on LinkedIn. So that's been episode 8, Misfits. I've been Chris.
I've been Brody.
And you stay classy, Misfits. We'll see you on the next one.